time travel, other dimensions, people who may be imposters that aren't people. Any of that sounds interesting to you? Those may be things that are the subject matter in the book that we're going to talk about today, which is We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kliewer. This is a very strange book, and I liked it quite a bit. Now, it's one of those books where you're like, what the F is happening? Because there is an element of what seems to be time travel, but it also seems to be like through different dimensions. Now, the premise of the book sounds pretty simple when you first get into it. There's this queer couple, Eve and Charlie, and they flip houses. They go in, they work on them for however long it takes, sometimes up to a year, and then they, fix it up and they sell it, and then they move on to the next one. They have this old house. It's kind of like out in the secluded area. There's not too many neighbors near them. Like you have to go quite a ways down the road to get to the nearest neighbor, and then town is like 30 minutes away. So Eve is home alone and she's doing some stuff around the house, and Charlie's at work. And one day there's a knock at the door. So she goes and opens it, and there's this family of five at her door. The dad's like, hey, I used to live here when I was a kid, and I was kind of hoping I could show my family around. He's like, 10, 15 minutes tops, if it's not any trouble to you. Eve has got like red flags going off, but she seems to ignore them. Like, there's no car in the driveway, and she's like, where's your car? And he's like, oh, well, your driveway is kind of icy, and we couldn't get it up the way, and so we just parked down the road. And she's like, okay, that seems somewhat legit. All right. And then she notices there's like dirt on his pocket and stuff. And she's like, these people really just coming out of the woods? And she's like, no, they said their car is parked further down the road. So, okay. And against everything she wants to say, because she has a hard time with confrontation and, standing up for herself and really just like saying what she actually wants. And so, despite her inner misgivings, she invites them in to look at the house. And so the dad starts giving a tour and telling his kids it's the dad, the mom Paige, and then there's two boys, and the youngest is a girl. Her name's Jenny. And so he shows them all the house, and they walk around. It's like, this used to be here, and this used to be here. He sees this weird, like, stained glass window in one of the rooms, too. And he's like, huh, that's weird. I thought that used to be in the front of the house. They see the house. They come into where Eve is, and they were going to go look in the basement, but Eve had the basement door locked. She's like, oh, I'd rather not you go down there. There's a bunch of tools, and we just moved in, so stuff's kind of, chaotic and whatnot. And the dad's like, oh, yeah, okay, that's totally fine. I understand. And then the little girl kind of really wanted to go in there, but whatever. So they're all going to leave, and they're in the foyer saying their goodbyes. And then all of a sudden, the youngest daughter has disappeared. And now these people are going to stay a bit longer. Upstairs, there was like this part in the wall where there used to be a dumbwaiter. And so they go upstairs, and the wallpaper had been peeled back, and it looks like the daughter, Jenny, has gone into the basement by way of dumbwaiter. So that happens. And at first, this family, like, they seem okay. They're not really giving off like weird or creepy vibes or anything in the beginning. And at first, it just seems to start out as like, oh, it's just going to be something with like, who knows what this family will be all about. Maybe it'll be like they're killers or whatever, and this, that, and the other. You're kind of thinking that, but it's not. It gets really weird and psychological, and time bends. Like, somehow this house seems to be almost like a weird nexus point, is what it seems like, because sometimes the rooms shift and change. So they go in the basement, Thomas and Eve, because they go to look for the little girl, right? The little girl, it seems like she crawled into like this one little area and she won't come out. And the dad's like, oh, she does this, so she won't come out. So we just have to kind of go upstairs and wait for her. And Eve's like, oh my God, I hate these people. I hate them so much. So they go upstairs to like wait. And eventually her partner Charlie comes home, and she kind of explains what's going on to Charlie, but stuff's like super weird. And as this book continues on, the family just like won't leave and really overstays their welcome. Eve is starting to like flip out and getting to a point where she's getting really angry. Charlie kind of thinks she's overreacting. And at one point, Eve had wandered off and went and talked to the neighbors. And there's this woman who lived kind of down the road, and the neighbor lady kind of filled her in a little bit on Thomas and about how he used to have a sister. What was weird is the lady said the sister's name was something different from what Thomas had originally said. And then stuff starts to get weird with like timelines. And I don't want to get like too into it, but at some point, there is like in the basement, there seems to be like a weird door that leads to like an old asylum, possibly, but it's there sometimes, and then other times it's not. There's also this A-frame that Eve discovers in the woods not too far away when she's out walking their dog that also seems to be like a weird portal, because this is the last thing I'll say, that so I don't get like too into it. I just want you to know like some of the weirdness. So she walks up and it's got like, it's riddled with like bullet holes. And her dog like shoots in there and she's like, F, because she didn't want to go in there. It looked really creepy, but she goes in there, finally finds her dog. And then she's coming back out and there's a guy in there and he's like, you shouldn't be here. You need to get out of here. Da 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 da. And then he kind of gives her like a weird cryptic warning about the family that's in her house, how he knows this family's in her house. He's like, you need to get them the F out of there. No matter how you have to, get them out of your house. And when she goes to leave this weird A-frame cabin in the woods, there's no bullet holes anymore. Those have like disappeared. So when she leaves there, is she coming back in a different dimension or time or what? Who knows? Stuff gets really weird. I loved the liminalness of it. I'm still not quite sure on what Thomas and his family were, but their last name is Faust. There's that whole story about Faust who makes a deal with the devil and all that, you know, like the old classic story about that. So that kind of like went ding, ding, ding in my brain. I was like, interesting that their last name is Faust. And I never quite understood if the family was actual real people just kind of displaced out of time, or if they were ghosts, but they were a little bit too real to not be ghosts. Then there seemed to be some getting lost in different dimensions because things would cease to exist. And they go into stuff with like the Mandela effect too, like toys that had existed but then that people remembered but then no longer existed, and there's just so much weirdness going on to it. It has a little bit of that like House of Leaves feel. It's almost like a haunted house, but it's not, because like the house changes, subtle differences. People don't remember who people are and all of a sudden seem to have like implanted memories. It's so freaking weird, but it was so good. And then it's one of those books that if you don't like endings that leave things kind of a bit open to interpretation and, you know, you kind of imagining what may happen, then you might not like it because of the ending. But I like that. So I thought it was pretty great. I really like this book. It's so freaking weird. So if you like liminal, weird, Lynchian, House of Leaves, strange books, We Used to Live Here is pretty great. And it also had a little bit of that, like, it made me feel like, if you ever saw the movie Cable Guy with Jim Carrey, when Jim Carrey just like wouldn't leave, that's kind of how these people were. They were the worst. So yeah, if that sounds good to you, you may enjoy this book. And if you're a fan of weird books, the next video coming up will be about another weird book. So stick around, check it out. And if you enjoyed hanging out today, hit that subscribe button, come back, see me again, and we'll talk about more bookish things and weird stuff.